Hi everyone. Obviously PBM safety is a business that I've been running for about 12 years now. If you don't already know me, please come and say hello to myself. I've also got Brian, our local Queensland rep, out at the trade stand, and really keen to hear some of this great security-based information from the group of speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Safety Paul. So now we've got an expert panel of some QPS members, Queensland Police jumping on board just to give us a little bit of a talk about the current security environment. The session's going to be moderated by Dean Hassall from Dean Hassall Consulting. Once again, someone who's probably quite familiar to most of the people in the room. Dean's got 25 years experience. I have a page and a half of information, and Dino said don't read it all out. So I'm not going to, but short of saying thank you to Dean and thank you to the police members who've come along for this session. So Dino, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome everyone, and welcome everyone remotely. As I said, there are a number of people, and how some of our other panellists have already alluded to, isn't it bloody great to see us all in a room together, face to face, doing what we do best, networking and talking to each other and learning from each other. The only problem is a few of us have to cram 3 nights into one tonight. So yeah, we're past our prime and we may struggle a little bit, be up and down on the one spot after a couple of beers. But it was great for Anthony to delegate the shouting to me again. He's been doing that for 25 years. Still to get my first back in return. But you know, tonight might be a different night. So whilst everyone's attention has been obviously all consumed nearly with efforts into the global pandemic, this topic is obviously of great significance, not only to our industry but to the community at large, and remains of high relevance and high interest. And we have a wonderful panel of experts to talk to us about that today, and kudos to them. I think Matt has come back from holidays today and been thrown into the deep end, and Senior Sergeant and Inspector and Graham have just jumped off a plane from Cairns about 30 minutes ago and made it by the skin of their teeth, so thank you very much. I'm sure we all noted, in April this year that ASIO Director General Mike Burgess mentioned that the risk of a terrorist or extreme attack in our country remains likely or probable in the next 12 months. And I'm sure the gentlemen have an opinion on that messaging and what it means and why it was put out there. And I'm sure we also all remember the tragic events close to our industry of the 2016 hostile vehicle attack in the Berlin Christmas markets and the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester in 2017, which probably acted as a catalyst to our country developing the 2017 Australian strategy for protecting crowded places against terrorism, and many of these gentlemen have been involved in that, and I'm sure will comment on it in the course of this presentation. I said to the gentlemen they have a bio with, if I read all their awards and their achievements and their experience, we'd lose half the session. So I said probably the easiest thing for me to say was these guys know their shit. But just bear with me for a moment, because I think it's important just to set the context of their experience. So firstly, we have Superintendent Graham Coleman, APM. Superintendent Coleman was sworn into the police service in 1983 and awarded the Australian Police Medal in 2011. He currently holds the role of Commander responsible for the Prepare, Prevent, Protect group within the Security and Counterterrorism Command, and is also responsible for expert specialist technical and logistical support of security and counter-terrorism risk mitigation. In particular, the planning and delivery of major events, and he's currently advising the Queensland Government on the 2032 Olympic bid. Touch wood. We have Inspector Matt Rosevia, fresh back from holiday, thrown in the deep end. If I read his profile, we'd say, let's not mess with Matt. He's got a pretty impressive profile, including currently maintaining the role of Inspector Operations Manager within the Engagement Division Program, Prepare, Prevent, Protect group within the Security Counter-Terrorism Command, representing the state on a number of national countering violent extremism working groups. That's a mouthful for a boy from Rockhampton. Matt is the recipient of the National Police Service Medal, QPS Bravery Medal and QPS Exemplary Conduct Medal for planning for the Gold Coast 2018 Commonwealth Games. Next inspector is Mr Graham Moffitt. He's the Principal Protective Security Analyst for the Queensland Police Service. Graham provides specialist counter-terrorism protective security advice to crowded places, infrastructure and government sites in Queensland. He's the Assistant Capability Advisor for crowded places capability under the Australian-New Zealand Counter-Terrorism Committee.
Dan, can I just clarify that?
Yes.
He's no longer the assistant. He is the capability advisor for that capability. Right, it's just been appointed yesterday.
Well done on the promotion. And finally, Senior Sergeant Simon Pekaj. He was sworn into the Queensland Police Service in 1996 and currently holds the position of Operations Leader for the State Coordination Unit of the Security and Counter-Terrorism Network and the QPS Engagement and Diversion Program. Senior Pekaj was a member of the QPS Olympic Proposal Team, QPS Counter-Terrorism Security Coordinator for competition venues at the Commonwealth Games Gold Coast 2018, and Operations Leader for Venue Security Planning for the G20 Brisbane and the Finance Meeting of Ministers in Cairns. So please let me now welcome up Inspector Matt Rosevear to present on the threat environment, protecting crowded places and the Run, Hide, Tell campaign. Let's go. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. So I've been cut short down to about 15 minutes, so I'm going to be very quick with the initial overview and then we're going into a panel discussion. Security. Everyone's keen for security. Yep. Security culture, it's up there. You run it in your organisation. It's one of your main priorities. No, we know it's not. World Economic Forum did a survey over the last 5 years. Pandemic is up there now, top right-hand corner on your risk assessment. Security and terrorism has actually dropped down below average in both areas. Is it complacency or is it because your time's valuable and you've got other priorities that you need to look at? I would say it's the latter because of COVID, economic resilience, financial implications, etc. Hopefully the presentation I give you today will explain to you why complacency is not an option, and there'll be a number of issues. So today I'm going to give you a very quick security environment brief on terrorism and security. Some of the information contained in this brief we wouldn't normally provide to you, but partnerships, information sharing and the transparency in our operations and the impact on the community, we believe is a main priority and concern for us. I'm then going to speak about the Australian Strategy of Protecting Crowded Places. Everyone's read that document? And also cover the Escape, Hide, Tell strategy, which was first implemented in 2019. So the security framework, broad scope of threat areas, potential for these areas, and the evolving shape and scope of terrorism, which I'll firstly cover, and then I'm going to go into security. There's two aspects. We have terrorism, we have security. So first I'm going to touch on is terrorism. Recently, ASIO have stated that we're going to an ideologically or religiously motivated violent extremism. Once it used to be Islamic extremism or right wing. Because of the amount of components out there, they've actually broken it up into two. If we look at the ideologically motivated violent extremism, they look at what the primary driver is. That might be white supremacy. So we look at our extreme right-wing groups, our Proud Boys, those type, Combat 18. We could go through to our sovereign citizens, those that don't believe there's any actual legislation or state law. They believe it's all common law based way back, and if you as a arm to the police and the government, I don't believe you have the powers or the legislation. And if you arrest me, I will send you a bill and it will be in Troy gold that you have to pay me in. And we probably receive about 5 of those a week now since COVID struck. Once we had 46 in 12 months, now we're getting about 5 a week. Then we look at the other ambit, which is your Sunni extremism or your Islamic extremism, your Christian extremism, which occurred in Sri Lanka, and all the religiously motivated aspects. So where do we sit at the moment? You'd probably be aware national threat level sits at probable. Credible intelligence. plausible scenario to indicate an intention and capability to conduct an attack in Australia. As I already cited, the head of ASIO stated that a terrorist attack is plausible in Australia in the next 12 months, with crowded places being the most likely target of any attack. And we'll go into why that's the case. But first, let's look at some of the, we'll call them persons of interest, or some of our clients. So presently, 65 Australians are currently in the Middle East that have fought with or otherwise associated with religiously motivated violent extremism groups. There's approximately 120 Australians that are known that have deceased as a result of the conflict. Since September 2014, 133 people have been charged as a result of 61 counter-terrorism related operations in Australia. 9 attacks have occurred. Well, it's actually 10 now because one wasn't counted in these stats. And 21 major counter-terrorism disruptions have occurred in Australia. 20 dual nationals no longer have their dual national passport, so their citizenship's been removed. Federal Court issued 14 control orders since 2019 with respect to terrorism offenders. And of those 14 control orders, 7 people have been arrested and charged for breaching those orders. So they are still there, they are still active. So what's our most likely form of attack? Low cost, locally financed, can pick up a knife anywhere. Basic weapons, homemade explosives, firearms, simple tactics, lone actor. You'll see 5 examples up there. Last declared terrorism event or incident in Queensland was December last year, Mr. Ragdi Abdi. That's the top left. Radicalised ISIL supporter. And as a result of his actions, he was shot dead by police. Prior to that, it's alleged that he actually killed 2 elderly people in their backyard. And it will be alleged that that was a rather vicious attack. The Burke Street Mall attack, 2018, attacker was shot by police after he said he shoot laden with gas cylinders, stabbed 3 people, killing 1. Terrorism incident. And I'm going to keep these pretty much nationally focused. I won't go too much into overseas. Image 3, Mr. David Muller, 47 years of age, rammed his police car into, his own car into police headquarters. Not terrorism related, but a security issue, and it shows hostile vehicle aspects when we're looking at low cost financing and what's available. Image number 4, 22-year-old Australian national Ihas Khan attacked on a street in Minto, southwest, stabbed Wayne Greenhole multiple times, arrested, charged with terrorism offences. And the last one is the 2015 shooting of Curtis Chang by a 15-year-old outside of police headquarters. So we talk about low cost, easy finance. First diagram there is a homemade flamethrower used in a backpack with a fire extinguisher. We then go into a gas bottle with heating leads that was trying to be set up as a bomb. The one in the drain is a number of aerosol cans tied together with a fuse. Homemade submachine gun. And then a variety of weapons, as you can see there, that we often pick up. We call ours active armed offenders if we have someone that's acting to cause violence, because the majority of knife attacks that we have. So we don't go what America use as an active shooter, because a lot of ours are by knife. And just of note, in the US to date, there's been 230 mass shootings for this year alone. And there's been over 7,500 people killed as a result of firearm shots or wounds. This is a ASIO overview of the current status in Australia. Likely targets, crowded places, that's why we're here. Then followed by police and military. The difference there is we have guns, so it helps. And infrastructure, airports, transport, bus depots, rail, train. The greatest target of infrastructure over, currently worldwide is trains, So we can see that either stations or the actual carriages, etc. themselves. The Sunni extremism is represented in the slides there, and you'll see the extreme right wing as well. And you'll see that Queensland is very dark in colour for extreme right wing. And then we have the Shia extremism. The stats there haven't been updated by ASIO as yet, because we had another one in 2020. So what are they chasing? They want high casualties, accessibility to targets. They want to have an impact. They want to be known. It's personal motivation or it's ideological. They want to promote their cause. And since COVID and online, it has actually gone even greater and further reach. A Al-Qaeda supported magazine, the Wolves of Manhattan, recently posted $5 million for anyone that would kill a law enforcement officer. And shortly after that, an administrative officer was killed in France as a result of that post. So it's about that insight. So what are the threat areas for us that our priorities are? Obviously, religious motivated violent extremism. Sunni extremism is still our number one concern. Within Queensland, we have now gone to a lean of right-wing extremism. And the right-wing extremism falls under that ideological or motivated violent extremism. So we're talking about Thomas Sewell, the National Socialist Party, the right-wingers. You would have seen recent arrests in Melbourne. And the ongoing, there's a number of actual areas that are anti-party resistance, and the Lad Society's folded to create the National Socialist. So they keep moving around. And they hide in plain sight. How many is it, boss, that they think? One in 5, is it? National right wing?
Look, Peter Dutton, when he's the Home Affairs Minister, spoke about people hiding in plain sight, because everything, you know, if we want to start an investigation into Islamist extremism today, we can go to a mosque, but the right-wingers don't hang out in a place at one location. And Peter Dutton talked about them hiding in plain sight. Some surveys around the world have indicated that it could be as many as 1 in 5 people hold extreme right-wing views. When we're talking about extreme, we're talking about not conservatives. We're talking about people who are outside of what is normal in the conservative field. And the ones that we're worried about sitting up here are the ones who use violence to achieve their goals. And their goals are generally to change government, to change society, to change a religion, to change something. And their views and their tactics are outside of what you and I would think would be normal.
So 1 in 5, I'm not sure. I know I'm not one, but one of these 4 gentlemen might be a bit concerning. Release of convicted terrorist offenders. Radwan Dakak, he was arrested under anti-terrorism laws, got released, was on a control order, 9 breaches, first breach in the first day. He was released from prison, so of that order. And then we have the returned foreign fighters and their families. Latest one was Ajim Ajazi, 30 years of age, deported from Turkey back to Australia and now faces terrorism offences. So these people that are coming back into our community. And ASIO stated that 1/3 of their caseload is now neo-Nazi right-wing, with the average subject member being 25 years of age, Caucasian male. So that lives in a rural region area. And if they're in a rural region area, they therefore generally have access to firearms because they're on properties or farming. So Australian terrorism arrests, religious motivated violence in Brisbane. And these are just a couple of examples just to show you that the threat is real, that it is out there, and that complacency can cause a threat to life. So we have Mr. Talib and Mr. Krazi, in association with the Joint Counterterrorism Unit in Victoria. They were arrested for facilitating travel of Australian foreign terrorists to Syria. Their network also funded the first Australian suicide bomber in 2013 that blew himself up and also killed 35 other people in Syria. Ari Shirani and Aaron Shirani, they were arrested in Epping relating to a fire and assault, and that was considered related to a motivated religious extremism. And Aaron Shirani was charged with membership of a prescribed organisation, namely ISIS. I'll go quick. Ideological motivated violence, extremism. Adelaide, we've had arrests for IED, manufacture explosives, extremist materials, and 18-year-old online urging communal violence. There's some iconography, easily accessible through ASIO. That's for right-wing extremism. Christchurch terror attack. The symbol that the offender there is, it's okay to be white. The Sun Ruin, right wing. On his firearm, the letters like 1488, 14 words of David Lane about the white children, and 88 for Adolf Hitler, Heil Hitler. Some propaganda. The ones on the right-hand side are banner drops that we see in major cities. And I'll go into the security environment very quickly. Fixated grievance field violence, we run a QFTAC, Queensland Fixated Threat Assessment Centre, where we deal with those people that are fixated on public office holders, or they have a grievance and they've demonstrated grievance field violence with mental health. And that they're actually risk assessed and they fall into certain categories where we have to manage them. Communal tensions and disruptive activism. How does it impact on you? Could impact on your supply, your actual businesses, reputational harm, depends on where it occurs. We look at the Adani protests, we have the refugee protests, anti-COVID restrictions. Blend these in with the Black Lives Matter movement and we start seeing violence occurring in America. It's escalated. So these protests, although peaceful, which isn't an offence, can become violent if the wrong people are involved. Foreign interference and espionage. Head of ASIO issued a statement, multiple alleged Chinese plot to infiltrate Australia's parliament in 2019. Multiple attempts from multiple countries to steal secrets and undermine its sovereignty. In 2021 to date, there have been 17 major data breaches, including NASIC, Northern Territory Health, West Oz Parliament, email networks, and the Microsoft. International data breaches include SolarWinds and the Colonial Pipeline. You can see the economic impact where ransomware or disruption to business has occurred. And then you look at your reputational impact as well. Australian strategy for protecting crowded places from terrorism. We do a number of these conferences and it's amazing how many people are unaware of what that actually is. It's readily available. It's about building your partnerships, information sharing and guidance, having a protective security framework and increasing resilience. Who has an evac plan? Fire evac plan? Yep, everyone's got one of them. Do you have a security incident evac plan? Is it the same as your fire evac? Excellent. Because first thing, if we're going to inflict harm, where everyone evacs to a fire, if it's the same as the other one, guess where I'm going to harm more people? Same place. The question I'll probably ask is, who makes the decision to enact that? How's that communicated? What roles, what responsibilities are maintained? Have you exercised it? Do you have a crisis management team? Do you look at a surge capacity in the event that this goes on for 4, 5, 6 days? And then what's your marketing after the event for your reputation and your businesses online? As stated, partnerships, better threat protective security, the more people that are aware that can contribute to your framework is a greater benefit. You're actually required under the Australian standards to ensure that you have appropriate planning. So if a number of people are killed at your venue or facility and you're in coroner's court, they're going to ask about what your planning for emergencies in that facility was. There's a number of resources there, and I'll provide these. Well, actually, they're already provided that can be circulated. ASIO outreach, crowded places self-assessment tools, security audits, guidelines and websites. Escape Hide Towel. It was a soft launch win in 2019, and what it was about promoting, in the event of an incident, escape, hide, tell. This is what we want people to do. If you're involved in a critical incident, it's fight or flight. So some people will just freeze and want to go hands-on, other people will run. It occurred in an airport in Queensland. They had a suspicious device located. They tried to evac people from the airport. Of course, everyone ran to the sterile area because they deemed that to be safe. As they're running to the sterile area, a number of bollards from the lineup started hitting the concrete floor. Then everyone thinks shots have been fired. And then old mate is seen sprinting across on the CCTV straight outside. About 3 minutes later, you see him walk in with his head down low, back to his wife to get her. So it's chemical, adrenaline, what happens in a situation like this. These are two examples of where it's been done very, very well. The Director of Security Centre Group, Mr John Yates, QPM, has implemented within Westfield shopping centres. You'll see the dot points, so I won't reiterate them there, but they have on their display signs emergency evacuation or armed offender, so there's a separation between the two. And if you access the Bond University website, they've actually got a video about how they've incorporated the escape hide towel to communicate that to all their staff, but also the students of the facility. So two really good examples that you can actually have a look at and follow, depending on your organisation and how it's fit for purpose. And that's me very quickly, right on time.
Well done.
Thank you, Inspector. We'll probably have some very keen people to ask some questions, but just to start it off, Superintendent, we touched on the strategy a number of times, and a couple of the pillars are about, strong partnerships and better communication. Do you think that's why the messaging's changed from ASIO Director General? I mean, I'm sure some people in the community were a bit surprised that, he came out in April and sort of talked about the threat assessment, which was unusual in the press.
Yeah, I think you'll find that a lot of security organisations across Australia, our police service is the same. If you go back 10 years, the coppers would tell you nothing in Queensland. Come 2014, when we had the G20, we had 28 partner agencies inside our command centre operating off our system. They actually could enter information into our system. ASIO is a little bit more recent than that, but that partnership, that we can't do it by ourselves. I think that's the message here. All of us need to be involved in countering extremism. All of us need to be involved in making the community safer. And, as Maddie said, there's information on that screen that 12 months ago we wouldn't have provided in a forum like this. But at the end of the day, for us to be saying to you that this is important, you need to understand why it's important, and that's why we are, and ASIO are releasing the information they do today.
Thank you. And also be interested in your opinion. Dr. Catherine Ball, our keynote speaker, talked a little bit about how important our industry is for the community, and venues which offer, can offer a whole range of services and probably emerging services in the future. Government spend a hell of a lot of money, as does private investment, in building places for social infrastructure that achieve a whole range of benefits for communities. And noting you're all fairly heavily involved in the Commonwealth Games planning and fairly heavily involved in the Olympic bid 2032, and those events can be very well planned, and in some facets, never over planned, but a lot of time and energy and resources. But you look around the community at the moment, there's a brand new theatre being built across the road at QPAC, a new stadium, recently in Townsville. This venue itself has had multiple millions of dollars of redevelopment in recent times. Do you think there's enough within the design of these new venues on a normal day-to-day basis in the integration of the safety by design principles and technology into everyday venue operations?
I'm glad you asked for my opinion, because that's easy. The short answer is no. So Graham, who's sitting to my left, is from our Protective Security Advisory team, and his team, very small but very skilled, are involved in a range of developments across the state. I mean, he's involved in Cross River Rail, Queen's Wharf, you did Townsville, yeah, keep going, mate.
I was just going to say, we did the performing arts venue over the road as well.
So we come in early, and for anyone who saw the Commonwealth Games, any of the venues, there was lots of overlay put on afterwards around security, which there's two things. It doesn't look good and it costs a lot of money. So if we can build in that security preventive measures at the planning stage, it actually makes for a better looking venue come an event, and it doesn't cost as much money when we're running events. I think the Gabba is a classic example of that at the moment. The number of roads we've got to close and the security we've got put in place for events there. When we design these things into the future, if there happens to be a improved Gabba coming along, if we can design these things in, it will be a better look, and it will be better security. Our Protective Security Advisory team works closely with government, but we also have done work with Stadiums Queensland. We've done work with the South Bank Corporation. We will do work with those sort of government-funded authorities, but we've also done work with council. So we're doing some work with the Gold Coast City Council at the moment. So we like to come in early, give some advice about how you can actually plan in security. But at the end of the day, the dollar is king. And quite often we'll find some of the advice we give is not taken up because there is a upfront cost.
Inspector, you won a medal for the Gold Coast 2018 planning. I had a little bit to do with that in terms of the venue use agreements, and as we mentioned I worked in the operations centre actually for the 2 weeks. The event seemed to flow very well. Biggest issue was getting security to the venues, which was a struggle on a daily basis. Our venue industry loves a war story or a case study. Was there anything you could share that we don't know about?
Just trying to think of an appropriate one. I'll hand over to Simon because he's aware of an incident with a hole in a fence at a major venue. Are you aware of that one? The large hole that was located
Yes,
at night?
Simon, I called you back from Brisbane, remember, at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So I'll let Simon explain that one.
The approach that we took with the planning for the Commonwealth Games, we took a lot of learnings from G20. I think that we did was we went to the UK, Inspector, myself and Graham did as well, and learned from some of their learnings with the Commonwealth Games in Scotland and also the Olympics. We brought over a thing called the Counterterrorism Security Coordinator Program, and that's about looking at identifying what threats you're going to look at, making the assessments against the venue overlays that were presented, and then identifying the vulnerabilities and obviously having you pre-established consequences, to then look at when we were going to what we were going to recommend against those identified risks. We had to take into consideration the commander's intent, predominantly the look and feel of the thing, and we really had to we shifted our focus as an organisation too, and we really just looked at and had to trust those assessments that we made on some things. So where traditionally you might, for example, at the Bowls Club, you would never let a vehicle go behind the temporary stadium. Based on the assessment that we did, we allowed certain vehicles to go behind the temporary stadium. They were some of the things that we learnt to trust yourself and do a few things like that. What we did have to do prior, so we did the planning stage, all those recommendations informed planning. Then based on that, that gave us a quality assurance process that we had to go out and physically look at the mitigations and do the quality assurance before the venues became active. Yeah. And as part of that, then when we thought the effect was achieved, then we signed off the venues to allow that. That continued throughout the process, and so, you know, the incident with the fence is a good example. There was an incident identified where there was a hole in the fence, but we had a level of...
It's at Carrara Stadium, so it's in the main stadium. It's a couple of days before opening ceremony.
But we had a high level of assurance from the strategies that we put in place, and rather than having to research the whole location and everything like that, we had a level of confidence based on the strategies we had put in place, the assurance process that we had, that there was no compromise to the event.
But the problem was that at 2 o'clock in the morning, when someone reported it, I was the deputy commander for the policing response to the games. I got woken up by my boss, who got told about it, not me. And my boss wanted to go out and have a look at the hole in the fence at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I've rung Simon, who for the first time in weeks had gone back to see his family in Brisbane. And we went out, and there was this big hole that people could have walked through at a fence at the back of Carrara Stadium. Now, the stadium's been locked down, it's been searched, it's secured, and all of a sudden there's a hole in the fence that's reported to me for the first time. So Simon eventually arrived an hour or so later. We've had a look, and I was thinking from my Counterterrorism Security Coordinator hat on about what we could do without having to go through and search this place again. And Simon pulled out his iPad and then produces a photo of the hole in the fence that had been there when he did his security assessment. So the process actually worked. There was a hole in the fence. The fence wasn't actually the security fence. It was an external fence, and a contracted security guard who hadn't seen the hole before suddenly decided that there was a security issue and that someone's inside, and they wanted to evacuate and search and the whole lot. And the processes that we had in place, Simon was actually able to show me a photograph of the hole of this external fence. The security fence was actually inside that, but it's such a big venue, I needed someone with his experience there to tell me that it wasn't actually the problem that I certainly thought it was.
Kudos to the security guard doing his...
And kudos to the security guard for raising it in the first place. And then my question there and then to Goldock, the head of security Goldock, was why wasn't this reported earlier? Because we'd had that lockdown for a week and a half, 10 days, something like that. But yeah, so problems happen, things happen, but the systems we had in place worked.
Mark, we might jump to the floor. I'm sure there may be some questions of interest for the highly esteemed panel here. So anyone got anything?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, hi, Wayne Middleton, Reliance Risk. I'm just interested, obviously COVID's, I guess, taught us all that there are many things that can affect the business that can, create a business continuity response. And, prior to COVID, we probably had 3 years where, counterterrorism was a big part of risk planning. 2020, the oxygen's been sucked out of that, and, I guess we all now have a whole range of hazards that we need to address. And what advice can you give to venue managers in terms of re-engaging and getting that balance right?
I'll start. Yeah, balance is a key thing here. Obviously, as Matt alluded to earlier with COVID, your business is in the bottom line and your reputation is a priority, and getting it right around COVID is a key thing. So what happened during COVID is we saw less attacks across the world. That's because there were less crowded places. I mean, people were in lockdown and there were less attacks. But what we did see was we saw more activity online. So there's a whole lot more stuff happening online now. That's why we've seen the emergence of groups like the National Socialist Network and some of the behaviour they've been up to within the last couple of weeks down in Victoria. And that's all come about because of what's happening online. The balance is up to you. You will make individual decisions around the protection of your brand and your business. From our point of view, so if anyone's Queensland based, our job is to make sure from a security and terrorism point of view that you don't lose focus of that. That's why we run crowded places forums throughout the state. There's one in Ipswich this afternoon. We've had them in Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Rockhampton, Mount Isa. And then we had a big one at the Brisbane, at the Gabba, which a number of people in the room were at. And again, there are some contact details which Maddie will have available for you. Our job, my job in the Prepare, Prevent, Protect group is simply that. My job as the group commander, as the operations commander, is to stop bad things from happening in the security and the terrorism field. and we will work with you and we'll provide the resources we have to do that. So the balance is yours, but when you want to reach out and ask questions, we're here to help. That's our job.
And can I just add that the mitigations you put in place don't have to be costly. Your venue's already set up, and it's about a culture, observations, processes, and how you go about your day-to-day business. So I don't think it's, I've got to put in $2 million worth of hostile vehicle mitigation. Is it the back door that's chocked open because you've got a smoker contingent that just go out there and anyone can enter into the premise? So some of the basic areas. Where's your PA system? Is it attached to your fire panel and that's the only one you have? Because I know where I'm going to stand if I've set off an IED, and I'll wait for you to come down so you can't tell everyone to escape. So it's more those processes and policies. And as the Super said, we've got a network throughout the state in Queensland where we have a regional key point of contact for whether you're up north, central, southern, southeastern. We have a key point of contact that we can provide you, and that's your conduit into obtaining resources, advice and information.
And I think one of the other things Matty said earlier about security culture is really, really important. Quite often we will talk to security managers and they will tell us that they have problems in getting the decision makers to listen to what their issues are. But it's not a security manager's responsibility to keep a venue safe. If you go now London's had a lot of terror attacks over the years. If you go to the underground in London, quite often you'll go, particularly in peak hour, and outside of where you flash your card to get in, there'll be a worker, just a normal worker, not a security guard, just a normal worker standing at the door, sort of helping people, but just being a first point of call. When I was over there in 2016, I spoke to the London, the Transport Police, and I asked why they were there, because they didn't seem to be valuating to the business. It's actually a security response, because someone who has a bad intent are more likely to go somewhere where there is no one represented from the community, from the business. They're more likely to walk out of that underground, because the undergrounds are so close over there, and go to another one to find out where they can actually get through. So the security culture becomes really important. The chocking open the door for the cigarette smokers, or leaving your computer on when you walk away from it, all of that sort of stuff becomes really important. One of the messages I'd like to give to you today, because I've got to tell you, my group is actually doing some work in our organisation at the moment, because in our organisation, we should have a really, really good security culture. In some areas it's really good. In other areas it's lacking woefully. So we're actually doing work within our own agency at the moment about improving our own security culture. And if that's one thing you can do that you can take back to your business or to your venue, is to talk about the security culture. And it's not just the venue manager's security culture, or it's not the security manager's security culture. It's everyone. It's your cleaners, it's your lawn mowers, it's your reception staff. Everyone needs to be involved in it.
And just on that, just in relation to the strategy, that talks about the key things are that the police and security agencies are well placed to detect and disrupt activities and investigate activities. But the other key fundamentals of the crowded places strategies are that that owner-operators of businesses have a responsibility to look after their staff, people visiting their locations, and to do that as well, that partnerships are crucial. So that's why our units go out there and run these forums, give you a better idea, because you know how to run your businesses day to day. It's our responsibility to tell you what the threat picture looks like. And then you then have to assess how that threat picture impacts on your business and what you decide to prioritise in. Without understanding what you're trying to achieve, planning is pointless. So if your threat, you identify one particular thing as your threat, and you want to plan for that, then that's fine. But if you identify 15 or 16 threats in the COVID environment, it's virtually impossible to look after all those threats. So our responsibility is to provide business industry and even our own police an overview of the security and counterterrorism environment, for you then to take that back to your organisations and look at how that might impact on you. There are tools available on the national website that can give some guidance. As Matt said, security counterterrorism network officers positioned throughout the state are available to assist when more technical aspects are required. Graham jumps in with their team and they can do that as well. So we're only too happy to help.
One of the greatest threats also, over the last 12 months, business email compromise has quadrupled. say your IT functions, and don't just think about your laptop and your access. Where's your server room? Is it locked? Because if we're going to do a access or throw a virus in, I'm going to go to your server room. So it's those type of considerations, I guess.
Got time for a couple more questions?
Hello, Lois Penny from Ungelbuck. You mentioned earlier that you've been engaging on some Brisbane projects like Cross River Rail and Queen's Wharf. Are you able to tell us more about the kinds of considerations when it comes to planning infrastructure, maybe emerging technologies as referenced earlier?
Happy to jump in on that one. Yeah, look, and I guess probably separate to the infrastructure space, but and probably more relevant to the room here, the crowded places space. And I'm not just saying this as the newly minted capability advisor for the crowded places capability, but the crowded places strategy from our perspective, and hopefully from yours as well, has been a great asset in that it just really articulated the roles and responsibilities that each group had across that space. As Simon was mentioning, you know, the role of police to come in and provide threat advice to you, the role of owner-operators to understand the risk and not mandate that there's a thing you have to do. So as we mentioned over there, it's not a you have to protect to a level. It's as long as you can understand it, articulate that, understand proportionality and what that means. Waffling a bit here, sorry Graham, but I just love the strategy. So I guess the role that our area plays is trying to get business to owner-operators to understand that threat, and because CT is a bit of a, I guess, a special security sphere, help understand the mitigations that are available, and like the inspector was saying, it doesn't always have to be millions of dollars worth of hostile vehicle mitigation. It might be much cheaper solutions that can be that, and sometimes us coming in with a sort of fresh perspective, understanding of that space. We've just had actually 2 days of training where we're talking about what our engagement often looks like, and it's kind of, it often starts with a hostile vehicle mitigation question. It's, oh, can you come in? We want to put in a barrier and we want to put it here. And that discussion then kind of evolves into a discussion about, well, what's the threat? What are you trying to protect? What other areas have you not considered? Are there other solutions to the problem that you think you might have? So sometimes what the organisation might be trying to fix, we can try and expand that thought, if that helps. I think I've avoided answering your question actually. But yeah, and like Graham mentioned too, we've done work with primarily government assets. I guess that's kind of the broader priority that we have. We're a relatively small team, so there's only so much we can do. And I guess, as Graham mentioned before too, the focus for us, or where we will try to prioritise, is those new builds as well. So things like the new performing arts venue, trying to get in early in that space to embed security in before the architects get all their grubby hands over it and make things out of glass. And I love architects, they're really nice.
A couple of architects in the room.
Sorry, apologies to all the architects out there, but trying to just get security thought about, because it's often the last thing that kind of gets put in that design process, and that's improving more and more, but you know, we're always there to push that barrow, so yeah.
Just let me jam in. And with all due respect to any security consultants that are in the room, I don't know if there are any, Graham's team have actually saved some of our government corporations money because security consultants will come in and do vulnerability assessments and make recommendations. And then when our team has a look at it, quite often these guys over-engineer what needs to be done. And I don't know the technical terms, but there was one nearby here where they recommended a certain type of bollard, so hostile vehicle mitigation. It was a certain rating, but the rating wasn't needed because a vehicle, because of its location, couldn't build up the momentum that you needed to put in that rating. The guys actually recommended a lower rating, simply because to get through a bollard you need momentum. To have momentum, you've got to build up speed, and if you can't physically build up the speed, then you don't have to over-engineer it. Yet at the same time, they left a gaping hole in their strategy, in their vehicle mitigation strategy, which these guys picked up and recommended they fix up. So that's the sort of work that they generally do. So we won't generally come in and do the work for you, for big government organisations. But certainly, you know, we've done work with Stadiums Queensland around some of the advice they've been given, and we've helped them to better understand what they need instead of what someone's trying to sell to them.
Yeah, I was just going to add the 4 principles that you've pretty much already canvassed: deter, detect, delay, respond. So don't just think about, I'm throwing my bollards in. How do we? Is there other ways to deter? Is there a physical presence of security? Is there CCTV to detect? Are we delaying by the reducing of a vehicle speed because of the road configuration? So you don't have to jump onto that really expensive mitigation straight away.
I'll throw in one last one from our session sponsor, PBM Safety. Paul.
Just wanted to get your guys' input on some of the bigger picture stuff. Obviously, throughout Australia, in the capital cities, there's a lot of precincts where there's multiple venues in an area, and just looking at some of the bigger picture stuff around, you know, the last mile of you know, coming into an event space and there being multiple spaces. You know, I mean, here's a classic example: South Bank here, the precinct in Melbourne, where you've got, you know, Rod Laver and the rectangular stadium and the MCG. Just some of that, I guess, consultative process within the venues about how to potentially push that forward with consultancy with the police as well.
That's a really, really good question, because we face the same questions because organisations face those sort of challenges all the time. It's really good to go back to the strategy, and the strategy talks about owners and operators have primary responsibility. That's one of the pillars in there. You know, I know the South Bank Corporation have been doing a lot of work about their space, because they are responsible for a geographical area, but there's a whole lot of other businesses within that geographical area. And while South Bank Corporation have taken on the lead about, yes, we're going to take responsibility, the strategy actually gives that responsibility to all the owners and operators, not just the precinct owner and operator. So that partnership part of the strategy now comes about, is about how does a precinct owner or a precinct manager, how do they get all of their people involved in the discussion, and then how do we, the police, or other security agencies or other government agencies, come along and actually value add into that. So, you know, taking South Bank as an example, they have a security consultant that they're working with. The security consultant have been talking to us. We are actively involved in the process of what they want to get going. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that everyone who has a finger in the pie is actively involved. And we've seen that, certainly the experience of all 4 of us through things like the Commonwealth Games and the G20, is that quite often people will go, that's not my responsibility. You know, my front door is here. Anyone who's got a liquor licence will know that your responsibilities as far as the sale of liquor doesn't just finish at your front door. You have responsibilities outside of that. And it's actually getting people to understand what their part in the bigger picture is, and then getting everyone to the table and having the conversation. And we do a lot of work around talking to people and getting them to understand their business around security. Obviously, the bottom line, profit, reputation is a huge one for everyone that's in this room. They're the things that you need to be thinking about when you say, no, that's not my problem. Because if it is your problem, if you are a part of the solution to the problem, and something happens, and you've got to sit in some sort of post-event inquiry, whether it's a coronial hearing or God forbid, a Royal Commission or something like that, and talk about what you did or didn't do. And we've seen that recently, you know, the tragic events at Dreamworld, you know, the Lint Cafe siege in Sydney, where the actions of organisations and individuals are scrutinised down to the millisecond or to the last cent by people who have a long time to actually consider what happens in a situation where people might have only had seconds to make a decision, or they only had a couple of hours to give a response, or whatever it happens to be. So if you actually start thinking about your role in security at the front end, and about what it might do to your bottom line. Take the El Paso shooting in 2019 in Texas. You know, there were, I can't remember the number, can someone help me? 17 people dead, I think. A right-wing extremist killed a whole lot of Hispanic people in a Walmart. And the Walmart closed down for 3 months. That shop closed down for 3 months while they refitted the place so that people would walk back into it. And they didn't do anything wrong. They just happened to be the poor, unlucky venue where an attack occurred. So in that whole precinct concept, which it is an issue, and we continue to work with precincts in our jurisdiction, but it really is about getting everyone to the table, getting everyone to understand what their role is in it is, and how we can work collectively to provide a more secure place for our employees and for people who visit our venues. I hope that answered your question.
I'm going to jump in
right.
there. Far be it for me to cut off people who can carry weapons, but yeah, again, in the interest of time, we do need to move on. But look, I think thank you to everyone for coming along. I know that I promised the ladies from our office 4 men in uniform on a stage, so I didn't quite get there, but it got 5 guys. But again, thank you very much, Dean, and thank you everyone for the session. So.